Hey everybody, thank you for joining me. This is part 2 of my bottom shelf vinyl voyage. Don't worry if you've missed part 1, this is not a continuing story, it's not going to affect anything, but essentially what I'm doing, this bottom shelf that I have here behind me is all my non-Beatles vinyl, apart from a couple of box sets over there. And I decided that, we buy these things and a lot of the time they don't get their airing that they should get. They don't get played as often as they should. So I'm going to go through the whole of my bottom shelf and play it in order. So part 1, I went alphabetically up to Dexy's Midnight Runners. I did the first of the D's, which in hindsight was a bit of a mistake, because in this video, part 2, this is all letter D's. This is the only video in this series that's going to be dedicated to just one letter, and that's because I've got some major artists in my D section. So I'm going to go through those and just show you what's there basically. This is further ahead than I am in this listening journey. Just last night I listened to Kate Bush Hounds of Love. That's as far as I've actually got up to in playing the records. But we're starting here from, apart from Dexy's, the letter D we're going to cover today. So let's have a look. First of all, this is going to be going through alphabetically and hopefully should be chronologically by artist. We will see. Let me know if there's any errors in the chronology here. But Dire Straits, in terms of studio albums, I've got all the Dire Straits studio albums on vinyl, but I haven't got any of their live albums on vinyl. Got them on CD, but this is the first album, Dire Straits, from 1978. Very different to what they would eventually become, but there's some cracking songs on here. Side A especially, Down to the Waterline, Six Blade Knife, what a great lesser known Dire Straits song that is. I would urge you to check out Six Blade Knife if you've not heard that before. And of course it's got Sultans of Swing on there, a very special song to me. When I was learning to play guitar 30 years ago, it was one of the first songs where I sort of started to try and play a little bit of lead. So it's a fantastic song anyway, one of my favourites. I actually just pulled my ukulele down off the shelf and thought, I wonder if I can still remember how to play it. So I was having a little bit of a play around with that, and it was something like, no, it wasn't that, it was... Goes like that at the beginning anyway, but always been an absolute favourite of mine. So this is a really good sounding record as well. This is on the Back to Black series, which I've got a lot of records in that series, and they generally sound really good. Second album from Dire Straits, Communique. Again, this is one of those where it's just got a lot of really good songs on it. There's a few that I'm not so bothered about, but the best songs on here: Once Upon a Time in the West, News, Where Do You Think You're Going, fantastic. Lady Writer is very much, I think, sort of Sultans of Swing Part 2, very much in the same kind of vein as Sultans of Swing, but a fantastic song. Portobello Bella, of course, is another great one, but the band looking pretty cool in a late 70s AOR kind of way, but that's another one on the Back to Black label, and an album that I definitely enjoy playing pretty regularly. This one is a bit of an anomaly in my Dire Straits collection. This is Love Over Gold, the third album, and when I was getting these a few years ago, I deliberately avoided the fairly recent remaster of Love Over Gold because I'd heard some not great things about it, certainly compared to the other albums where it was, I think, seen that they had done well on that. So I managed to get an original pressing of Love Over Gold. I sort of held out until I found one. It's actually coming apart at the bottom there. Might need to get a bit of glue on that. But again, the first couple of songs on here, fantastic. Telegraph Road, Private Investigations. I think Private Investigations was one of those songs that introduced me to Dire Straits 30 odd years ago. I would say this is my least favourite Dire Straits studio album, Making Movies. Apart from Romeo and Juliet, which is a fantastic song, it's not an album that I'm that fussed about, to be honest. I mean, it might grow on me eventually, but okay, Tunnel of Love, that's good. But there's nothing else really on there that has grabbed me massively over the years. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that is my least favourite Dire Straits album. I'd be interested to know what's your least favourite Dire Straits album, if you have one. But this one again is on the Back to Black label, so it's a good pressing of it. It sounds very nice, but just an album that I probably need to get to love a little bit more than I do. We've then got the classic. I mean, I know it's been overplayed over the years. Sometimes albums are overplayed for a reason, just because they're so damn good. And Brothers in Arms is one of those. One of the classic albums, obviously one of the albums that ushered in the CD era. I think, wasn't it the biggest selling CD in the world for a while when it came out? Fantastic song. This brings back great memories for me of when I would play this album. I really can't remember where I got hold of a copy of this album from, back in probably about 86, I think, when I first got this. I can't think who would have had it for me to have taken a copy of. I had it on a C90 cassette. But I would play this in my bedroom, and this is one where my mum would shout upstairs, "Andrew, turn that music up!" She was a big Dire Straits fan, and she always liked hearing me listening to them. But I mean, just today, I've been in the car today, radio on and Walk of Life played, and I'm never going to get bored of that song. I know a lot of people really don't like Walk of Life. But just a fantastic album. I'm not too fussed about One World near the end. I think if that either hadn't have been there or it had been replaced with something a bit more in keeping with the rest of the album, I think it would have lifted it probably from a 9 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10 album for me. But this one sounds really nice. I would like to get hold of the newer version that came out. Was it about 2 years ago? They did another pressing of this, which is supposedly going to be about the best you're ever going to hear it, direct from the master tapes. I haven't got that, but again, this Back to Black version, when it says Lacquers cut by Chris Bellman and Bernie Grundman on the cover, you know that you're not far off the best that you're going to hear on that. So it's always going to be a special album for me, is that one. As is this as well, to be honest. The last studio album that they made, On Every Street. I really like this album. This was one that I got the CD when it came out, but I didn't get this vinyl reissue until maybe about 3 years ago. But it's a great start. Calling Elvis and On Every Street are two great songs to kick off the album. And there's a couple of songs in here that I'm not too bothered about, but You and Your Friend, wow, what a song that is. Absolutely fantastic song. On the CD that I've got, for a long time I thought this is the best sounding song I have on CD in terms of sound quality. I don't think the same about it on vinyl. I mean, it still sounds absolutely fantastic, but it's not one of the best sounding songs I have on vinyl, even though on CD it is. But I don't know what it is about this album as well. This is an album that I would never ever consider playing at any other time of day other than late at night. This is a real late night album for me. And I don't know what about it is, but it just wouldn't feel right played at any other time of day. But I thought that was a really strong album to finish on. Apart from, I was never really bothered about, I mean, Heavy Fuel's okay, but towards the end, I quite like My Parties. It's quite inconsequential, but a decent song. But some of the songs towards the end have never really grabbed me as much. But that's the Dire Straits. I think that's every Dire Straits studio album there. We then move on to the Doors, and my goodness me, I spent so long messing around figuring out what version of this album I should buy on vinyl, because I wanted to buy it once and then not have to think about, oh, can I get a better version? And I'm sure there will be better versions of this out there, but they were, for me, prohibitively expensive. So I ended up with, let's get this sticker out here. This one here is the Rhino vinyl. You'll see there. That's the version I ended up getting, which was only about £20. Probably maybe about a year ago I got this on vinyl. I've since managed to get a high-res digital download of every Doors album. They were doing an absolute bargain on the Cobras website. I think it was something like £16 for the entire studio discography of the Doors in high-res. So I've been listening to that a lot, but this sounds really good as well. And things like Light My Fire, when you hear the full expanded version on album, just superb compared to how they tend to mutilate it on radio when you hear it and just sort of rip out the heart of the song in the middle section, the instrumental keyboard section. But it's an album I'm I'm still learning about this album, but I've played it an awful lot in the last couple of years or so, and really, really appreciating it. The only other album that I've got on vinyl from the Doors is LA Woman, and predominantly I bought this because of Riders on the Storm, which I think is a fantastic song, and I'd heard it, I'd only ever really heard it digitally, and I really loved the song, but I thought I want to get this on vinyl. And when I do this Bottom Shelf Vinyl Voyage, and when I get to this point, I'm really looking forward to playing this one again, because I think I've only played this once, and I remember really enjoying it. But I remember thinking, wow, this sounds like the hairiest, manliest, sweaty rock album I think I've ever heard. It just oozes hair and manliness. But it was very interesting, and I'm certainly looking forward to knowing more about this album, because there is a lot more for me to learn about it. Yeah, really nice sounding version as well. So that's it for the Doors. We then go on to somebody who I've never really talked much about, despite him being probably one of my musical heroes. The absolute genius that I'm sure many of you know, and many more people still probably don't know, Nick Drake. The guy was a genius, he really was. Just those 3 albums that he made between the very late 60s and the early 70s, before he sadly passed away very, very young. But what he left with these 3 albums is almost perfection. It really is. So in the mid-90s, I think it was 1995 when I first got to know about Nick Drake. Like a lot of people came to Nick Drake through the Way to Blue, An Introduction to Nick Drake CD. And there was a couple of songs from that a very good friend of mine at the time introduced me to. And those 2 songs were Cello Song, which is on here, and Hazy Jane 2, which is on the next album. And I was sort of hooked. Got the albums on CD and then progressed to getting the vinyl versions maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, perhaps. But those of you that know Nick Drake's albums will know how great they are. If you haven't heard them, then there's probably not many better artists for you yet to discover than Nick Drake. He was unique. Such a shame that there is actually no live footage out there of him playing, to my knowledge anyway. I don't think that there is. But him and a guitar, sometimes a little bit of orchestration, occasionally some other instrumentation included. You're not going to hear much better than this. This isn't my favourite album of his. That's the first album, 5 Leaves Left. My favourite Nick Drake album, I would say, is the one that came next, Brighter Later. Album number 2. This, overall, I would say, is my favourite. And Hazy Jane 2 that I mentioned, which was the other song that introduced me to him, is on this album. And then at the end of this album, or towards the end, you've got Northern Sky, which is one of the most beautiful songs you might ever hear. It's just absolutely superb. And songs like At the Chime of a City Clock, One of These Things First, Fly, Poor Boy. Poor Boy's quite sort of jazzy, vocal jazz, which was a bit of a departure that Nick Drake occasionally did. This is just absolute perfection, this album. I love it so much. And when I got back into vinyl about 5 years ago and bought my Riga P1 that I had at the time before I upgraded to the P3, you got to choose a vinyl record with it from a list of hundreds. And the one that I chose was this, Nick Drake's 3rd and final studio album, Pink Moon. Beautiful album. I did a gig years ago with my good friend Stuart. Hello Stuart, if you're watching. We did an acoustic gig, and it happened to be coincidentally on the 30th anniversary of Nick Drake's death. So I can't remember if it was deliberate or whether it was coincidence, but we played Pink Moon, which I think got famous in America. Was it used on some sort of car advert, I think? So I think that was a lot of people in America's introduction to Nick Drake, was hearing Pink Moon on a car advert. But it's a beautiful song anyway, and the title track of his 3rd and final album. But looking at the the songs on here. Road is a great song, which will... I mean, they're all beautiful. They're all absolutely beautiful. And From the Morning at the end. I doubt that there's anybody, if you were to look at any person or band who made just 3 albums, no more, no less, I doubt you'll find any that have left a better legacy than Nick Drake. And finally for Nick, I've got this, which is a kind of a compilation album called Made to Love Magic. But it's really good because it's a mixture of various things where it's songs that, for example, ended up with orchestration on the albums. And you might hear those songs without the orchestration, so it's just hearing Nick and perhaps his guitar. There's others where Nick originally recorded orchestration, but then decided not to put it on the final edit of the album. And you hear this with the orchestration that he himself created and had recorded, but eventually decided not to use. And also at the end of this album, Nick went into the studio to record 4 songs that would have hopefully gone towards being on his next album, but he was really in a bad place at that time. And one of those songs, called Toe the Line, was the final song that he ever recorded in his studio, and that's on here. So it's really poignant when, if I remember rightly, I think you can hear him putting his guitar down at the end of the song, and you just think, that's it. That's the sound of him done, finished. He never recorded anything else after that, so it's quite jarring to hear the end of his studio life on record, and that had never been released until this album. So if you're a Nick Drake fan and you don't have this album, you're going to hear some alternate versions of things that you already know, but I would really recommend checking it out because there's nothing there that wasn't something that Nick wanted. Even if he wanted it initially and decided against it, it's all kind of original stuff there. So it's really interesting to listen to. We're still on the Ds. There's a lot of Ds in my collection, as I said earlier. But we're on to Mr. Dylan. Okay, so if you're a Bob Dylan fan, I think there's hopefully some things here that you'll like seeing. I have always been a massive fan of the debut album, simply titled Bob Dylan. And I would go so far as to say, and I don't think this is a popular opinion, I don't think there's many Bob Dylan albums that I enjoy listening to more than this one. I wouldn't say it's near his best, because he made so much more that is probably better, but as a favourite, this is right up there. Some of these songs just feel like so much almost early punk. The way that he attacks the guitar and attacks the songs is incredible. So things like Fixing to Die and Freight Train Blues, Gospel Plough, for example, he's really, really going for it. And it's an astonishing album. It's just him and his guitar, maybe a little bit of harmonica here and there. That's it. There's nothing else on the album. And like I said, I'm going to have very few occasions where I enjoy listening to a Bob Dylan album more than that debut. Now, although I've got all the Bob Dylan albums, mainly sort of in CD box sets, for example, I don't have all of them on vinyl. So, you're going to see some gaps. Like, for example, I don't have Freewheeling on vinyl. I'm sure I will do at some point. But a couple of these are really good versions that I picked up from my good friend Michael. Hello, Michael, if you're watching. So he bought the Bob Dylan in mono box set. I think it was during lockdown, and he already had a couple of the albums that were the same pressings he already had. So he decided to sell those, and I straight in got a couple of them. And this was one of them that I got from him, Another Side of Bob Dylan. It's a real nice music on vinyl pressing, which I always find to be a good sort of marker of quality. But this is a song that an album, that I really enjoy listening to. It's, some of it is a little bit protesty, but it's still that very early folky Bob Dylan phase. All I Really Want to Do is a great opener. Chimes of Freedom is great. I Shall Be Free, number 10, I really enjoy. Ramona, beautiful song. It's got Ballad in Plain D on there, which I think is one that Dylan sort of often says, or has said, it's one of the few songs that he regrets writing. Maybe a little bit of a nasty sentiment in the lyrics there. My Back Pages, that's a beautiful song. I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now. It's a phrase that I often sort of used to think about myself sometimes. You know, when I was a teenager, listening to music that was way older than what my friends were listening to, and then, for example, the likes of the Stone Roses and Britpop came along and pulled me back to the age that I was. I often used to think about that phrase. You know, I was so much older then, when I was a 16-year-old listening to nothing but Simon and Garfunkel and the Beatles and that. But I'm younger than that now, because later on I started getting into music more for my age. So I've always sort of thought a lot about that particular phrase on that song. But yeah, beautiful album from Dylan's early phase. As is, the times they are a-changing. This is a beautiful album, and this is one where, for example, Boots of Spanish Leather, I'm pretty sure, is on this one, isn't it? Yeah, Boots of Spanish Leather. What a great song that is, especially in mono. Sounds fantastic. But again, it's quite sort of down. It's quite a downbeat album, is this? Which I always find it's interesting. Dylan in the early career, where he was often very, very funny. You take something like Talking Bear Mountain Picnic Massacre Blues. It's a very funny song, and it always makes me laugh. And then he'll be doing stuff that is very, very serious, you know, like The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, Only a Pawn in Their Game, Ballad of Hollis Brown, for example. You know, these are not happy, whimsical throwaway songs. So it was interesting how he was sort of changing it up during his early career. But a beautiful sounding album. This is one that I picked up quite cheap. Before I got back into vinyl, I was sort of collecting a few things, knowing that I might do at some point in the future, and this was like £3. Back when you could still pay £3 for an album in a second-hand shop. I wish you could do that these days. I can't really play this album though, because it horrendously skips on Desolation Row at the end, so I've sort of stopped playing this particular copy of the album. But again, what an album, and the sort of ushering in of that new phase of Dylan. But this has got, I mean, some of the songs on here, like a Rolling Stone, one of the greatest recordings ever set to tape, possibly. And some fairly standard sort of rock, like Tombstone Blues, for example. Ballad of a Thin Man, obviously Mr. Jones on there, Dylan's Mr. Jones, that Lennon later sang about. Highway 61 Revisited, of course, fantastic, and Desolation Row. Dylan's known throughout his career for putting some absolutely epic songs at the end of his albums, and are there many more epic than Desolation Row? Absolutely fantastic. I need to get myself a better vinyl version that doesn't skip on Desolation Row, and I can actually play. This was the other one that I got off my friend Michael when he was selling those ones that he got in his mono box. So this is a mono copy of Blonde on Blonde. It's an interesting album. I think, well, I mean, that's an understatement, isn't it, to say that Blonde on Blonde is an interesting album. I always have this thing with this album that about half of it is probably as good as you're ever going to hear on an album. And then there's another half of it that I'm just not that fussed about. So, I mean, it obviously gets off to a divisive start with Rainy Day Women, numbers 12 and 35. It's taken on its own in isolation. It's not a great song at all, is it really? But is it a great opener for this album? Probably is, although it's never going to be a favourite of mine. Pledging My Time certainly ups the quality a bit, well, quite a lot compared to what went before it. And then you've got things like Visions of Johanna. Incredible, incredible song. It really is. And followed by One of Us Must Know. Brilliant. And Then I Want You. What a 3-song hit that is. Fantastic. Memphis Blues Again. Stuck Inside a Mobile with the Memphis Blues Again was a song that it took me a while to warm to, and it was only when it was on the bootleg series. Is it volume 7, the No Direction Home? I think it's on there, Another Take of It, that song really hit me as how great it is. But then you go through this and songs like Just Like a Woman, Fourth Time Around, and then Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands at the end. I was having a little conversation with my friend Michael the other day about what's the best ending to an album. Is it Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, or is it Desolation Row from the previous album? I went with Desolation Row. I think he would have gone with Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, but both absolutely incredible. But then probably the songs that I haven't mentioned on here, they're good. They're, perfectly great songs, but I don't think they're in the same league as the rest of the songs on the album. So it's quite a mixed bag for me, is that one, of absolute brilliance and other stuff that, I'm not as fussed about, but obviously a classic album. And then, like Dylan did, he would just go and do something completely different. He would change his voice, he would change his style, he would change just even how he looks. I mean, he even looks like a completely different person on the cover of John Wesley Harding. But what an interesting album it is. And I love the little sort of folklore thing about, is it the Beatles that are on the cover of this album? And you think, oh yeah, where is it? And it's something like you turn it upside down and you look in these trees and it looks like there's four faces and they look a bit like the Beatles. I mean, I'm sure that's absolute nonsense and coincidence, but it's something that's often been said. But it is an enjoyable album, this. I mean, I certainly wouldn't rank it amongst my favourite Dylan albums, but it starts off good. John Wesley Harding. You've obviously got All Along the Watchtower here that I think Jimi Hendrix made it into one of the great cover versions of all time. Ballad of Frankie Lee and Judas Priest is a good fun song, and it's a good, interesting album, but it's not often one that I choose. If I'm in a Dylan mood, it's probably rare that I would pick that album. Unlike the next one. Nice little segue there, wasn't it? Unlike this one, I will often pick New Morning. Again, it's a music on vinyl pressing. And, again, if I was going to say what do I think are the best Dylan albums, which are the albums that he absolutely nailed it and made his best artistic statements, I'm probably not going to say this. But it's one of my favourites, absolutely. And it's a bit bonkers in places. If Dogs Run Free, it all goes a bit sort of Cleo Lane vocal jazz weird, but I really enjoy it. New Morning, the title track, is great. Three Angels is where it goes a bit weird again. The Man in Me is a fantastic song. Day of the Locusts is great. The title... not the title track, the opening track, If Not For You, which obviously George Harrison put on All Things Must Pass as well. So it's an album that I will often pick if I'm in a Dylan mood. Certainly more, it's in the sort of highest centile of ones that I would choose to pick. This one of Dylan's lesser known albums. This was about 1973-ish, something like that. And really, I bought there's some awful stuff on here, but the reason that I bought this is for the first song, Lily of the West, which I discovered just on some sort of, I think I discovered it on like a Spotify playlist, and I absolutely hammered that song, but found this quite a difficult album to get hold of. It's not often one that you'll see on the racks in a record shop, for example. But Lily of the West is a fantastic song, it really is. We've got some weird cover versions on here. Can't Help Falling in Love, Mr. Bojangles, Big Yellow Taxi, for example. It's also got Spanish is the Loving Tongue on here, which there was a piano, maybe not demo, but early take of it on was it Another Self-Portrait bootleg series? Absolutely beautiful. Far better than the version that's on this album, but that for me is worth it for Lily of the West alone. We've then got, you're gonna spot a massive gap around here for the fact that I don't have Blood on the Tracks on vinyl. I know. What sort of Bob Dylan fan am I? I will have one day. I need to, again, it's one of those that I really want to buy once and buy right and get the best version of. And at some point, I will commit some time to doing that. But anyway, we're talking about Desire now. I would say this is one of Bob Dylan's great albums. Superb with Hurricane at the start. What an epic song that is about the injustice of being accused of a crime that you didn't commit. Some of these songs are songs that obviously when Dylan did his Rolling Thunder tour, he made superb live versions of some of these songs. So for example, Isis, the version of Isis that's on that Rolling Thunder film. It's phenomenal, but it all stems from being a great song at the start. Mozambique is great. There's just one song on here that I really, really don't like, and it's one of my least favourite Dylan songs of all. And that's Joey. I just want it to be over. I just want to move on to the greatness that follows it on side 2, because the rest of side 2 is absolutely banging. Romance in Durango, which there's a fantastic live version of that on the bootleg series, the early one that was dedicated to that era. Fantastic live version. Black Diamond Bay, great, and then Sarah, another epic Dylan song to finish with. But that, excluding Joey, which I don't like, is one of my favourite Dylan albums. Again, it's one that I'm often going to choose to play. Oh, what an album. This is Oh Mercy. Fantastic. From, was it 1989, I think it was, yeah. And this, I mean, this is not a new issue. This is probably an original pressing. It feels really lightweight, like a lot of those records of the 1980s do. But Oh Mercy, this sounds incredible. When you listen to something like Man in the Long Black Coat, and just the way that track sort of builds with the sort of chirping noises and building up a sort of a vibe at the start. The Daniel Lanois production is just superb and absolutely perfect for this album. I mean, obviously he was the hot thing at the time, doing work with Dylan and U2, for example. He knew how to make things sound really great at that time, and this is just packed full of really great songs. Political World, Where Teardrops Fall, Everything Is Broken, Ring Them Bells, Man in the Long Black Coat. Most of the time, I mean, it's ridiculous how good this album is. If there's anybody there who's not familiar with Oh Mercy, I would really recommend spending a little bit of time with that, because it's a superb album. And then, I mean, when I get to this point in this Bottom Shelf Vinyl Voyage, I mean, it's going to take me a heck of a long time just to get past this. I only got this fairly recently. This is the Bootleg Series Volume 1 to 3 vinyl set. They were doing some sort of ridiculous deal on it. I can't remember what it was now, but it was too good to turn down. I've had this on CD for probably not far off 30 years, but I hadn't got it on vinyl till just recently. Is there any ongoing sort of archival type series from any major artist that's been going longer than the bootleg series? It's ridiculous that it's been going over 30 years now and there's still new editions been brought out. And this is one of those rare ones that covers a really long time span. You know, right back from there's 1961 recordings in here, and they are wonderful, those really early ones, right through to the back end of the 80s. So you're covering a 28-year period on this album, finishing with sort of songs from the Oh Mercy era, alternative versions of. But especially the sort of first disc of this is incredible. Those early 60s songs, even predating his first album, and things like I mentioned earlier on, Talking Bear Mountain Picnic Massacre Blues is on here. Such a funny song and fantastic. But things like He Was a Friend of Mine, No More Auction Block, Quit Your Low Down Ways, just beautiful songs. Talking John Birch Paranoid Blues is another one that I really enjoy, and quite a funny song. So that's going to take a lot of getting through when I get to it, because like I said, I did buy it fairly recently and I've only played disc 1 so far on the vinyl, so I've got a lot of the vinyl there to learn for the first time. I really enjoy this album, Good As I've Been to You. So, you know, it's real sort of back to basics for Dylan. It's him on it's his acoustic guitar, bit of harmonica, and that's it. I don't think there's anything else on the album, or anyone else on the album as far as I know. If you know differently, please educate me down in the comments. But things like Blackjack Davy, fantastic. Frankie and Albert. And my favourite on here is right at the end, Froggy Went A Courting. You know, it's the old sort of is it a nursery rhyme? Would you class it as a nursery rhyme? I'm not sure, but I really, really enjoy that. Arthur McBride as well is beautiful on here. So that was a little phase that Dylan went through in the early 90s that I'm really glad he did. And that for me was the pinnacle of it, that particular album. And this was my sort of introduction to the modern Bob Dylan, appropriately with the title. This came out, I bought this on CD the day that it came out, and it coincided right with the point where I was creating my own digital library and buying an iPod, for example, and walking home from work every day. That used to take me about 50 minutes. I would have time to listen to an album. It would very often be this. I absolutely played this album to death back in about sort of 2005-ish. 2006 even, sorry, when this came out. Beautiful album, and this sounds incredible. This was, it only cost me about £16 did this, which I could not fathom why. It's a double album, and it sounds incredible. If you get a chance to buy Modern Times on vinyl, it sounds superb. But I love that album from start to finish. And it's probably the album of Bob Dylan's that I've played more than any other during my life. I then got this, so although I don't have blood on the tracks on vinyl, as I said, I have got the bootleg series version here, so alternative versions, you know, for when he obviously did sessions in different places, and this contains some of those other versions. So I think it's not far off the actual album track listing, but all different versions of, and just, yeah, it's interesting. I prefer the original album, but this is very interesting to go to as an alternate. And I would say that Tangled Up in Blue is maybe my favourite Bob Dylan song, possibly. That's up for debate, perhaps on another day. We're going obviously very recent now. Rough and Rowdy Ways from a couple of years ago. Again, this was unfathomably cheap. I couldn't figure out why this was only, again, about £16. It's a double album. It's a beautiful gatefold package. Nice heavyweight vinyl that sounds incredible. But it just didn't seem to cost much, which was great. Lovely inner sleeves. Look at that, beautiful. And I think with this album, I wish it was a little bit more up-tempo in places. The first sort of 4 or 5 songs are really, really slow. And then it gets to, is it Goodbye Jimmy Reed, I think was the first one, where it sort of changes the tempo a little bit, and it benefits. You're really ready for it by that point. And then you've got the epic again. He's finishing the album on an epic, Murder Most Foul at the end, which takes up, certainly takes up the whole of one side. Is there an empty side on this disc? I think you've got, oh no, it's got, no, Murder Most Foul is side D, so the main album takes up 3 sides, and then Murder Most Foul takes up a whole disc on its own, a whole side on its own, sorry. So it's a very interesting album, and the quality that Bob's putting out still in his early 80s is superb, to be honest. And this is the last one for this video. This is the end of the D's. Like I say, it's the only letter that's getting a video dedicated to itself. Bob Dylan, Springtime in New York, the bootleg series, again from a couple of years ago this came out, covering the period of 1980 to 85. So this is, again, I've got a massive bargain on this. There's been a lot of really good bargains to be had on Bob Dylan vinyl over the last sort of couple of years or so. If you keep regularly checking the prices, it's worth doing. But things like, I really enjoyed the Joker Man on here, the alternative take of Joker Man, really nice. And Blind Willie McTell, one of Dylan's most incredible songs that inexplicably didn't get released at the time. And it took it until, I think it was that bootleg series 1 to 3, I think it appeared on there. Was that the first time it had been released, or was it on Biograph? I can't remember. I think it was bootleg where it was out for the first time. An astonishing song. And then New Danville Girl towards the end, Another epic, fantastic song from Dylan. So this is a 2-disc set. So I think when on this ongoing Bottom Shelf Vinyl Voyage, it's going to be a while before I get to this. I anticipate this journey is going to take me months. I think this video series will be a lot quicker than that. I'll certainly get there before I finish listening to them. But yeah, you know, I'm doing that. I'm doing this journey. I can listen to other things whenever I want, and I do. But when it's those times when I think, well, what shall I listen to today? Right, okay. I'll go to the Bottom Shelf Vinyl Voyage and I'll pull out what's next. Next up for me is Kate Bush Sensual World. I might do that tonight. We will see. So I'm up to the late B's at the moment. Not even started with the D's that I did on here with Dire Straits. But you know, let me know your comments about any of these albums, any that you particularly love or really don't love. I would love to hear from you as always. And thank you for watching. I'll be back with part 3 at some point very soon, as well as hopefully some Beatles news and McCartney news. I would even love some John and George news, but let's see what happens. So thanks for joining me. I'll see you very soon. Bye.